Hey guys, it's Jay Dill here, and welcome to News with an Alternative Perspective. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, guys, today I want to talk about Libya. Does anyone remember Libya? Well, I know you do. Well, MP for Romford has said that David Cameron needs to be summoned into the Houses of Parliament to stand before the Foreign Affairs Committee to explain, and I quote, the ill-fated war in Libya, which he says caused the country in North Africa to dive deeply into crisis and into ISIS control. But maybe that was the plan altogether. Now, the story does get deeper. If we look into Hillary Clinton's recent email scandal, many of the emails were discussing Libya and the disgusting invasion, which I will be calling it from now because that's what it was, an invasion. And this invasion was allegedly led by France. There have allegedly been emails in which Nicolas Sarkozy is trying to basically flex his French muscles, and is doing this is not because of the apparent Arab Spring and the need for democracy, Western style, but because Colonel Gaddafi was making a pan-African currency which was backed by gold, because Libya had one of the biggest gold reserves in the whole world. And this would mean that Africa was less dependent on Europe, and this would mean that oil would be sold in this new currency. It would not be sold in dollars. So America would have serious competition. So Nicolas Sarkozy did not like this. He wanted to assert his imperialism into Libya, and he wanted to take Colonel Gaddafi down. And he used NATO as a disguise to do this, along with the other allies. Now, apparently, David Cameron stepped down a day before this report was actually meant to be published. So that's a bit of a reason as to why he stepped down from his MP post. Now, the war in Libya was caused by the apparent Arab Spring, the apparent need for democracy, because apparently Colonel Gaddafi was supposed to be a threat. Colonel Gaddafi was a Muslim, and he was beaten up on the street, and he was not allowed a proper Muslim funeral. And we see also a similar pattern with the so-called death of Osama bin Laden. Apparently he was thrown in the sea. So what we have here is we have a major human rights breach of freedom of religion, and of course the right to life. The fact is, watching a man get beaten to death, is that democracy? I'm not sure. And as we talk about the word democracy, that's one of our core British values, which the kids are now taught in schools. But I honestly think if you go into Iraq and Syria and you talk about Western democracy, I think they will prefer to stay exactly where they are. If you don't know, guys, Libya is a failed state. It was one of the richest countries in Africa. It was an amazing country. And of course, Colonel Gaddafi wasn't perfect, but how was Libya better? Was it better as it is now? No. There's actually no current embassies in Libya. Libya is it's absolute chaos. There's gun violence. There's international. There's excuse me, not international. There's interdimensional bordering on civil war between the people of Libya. Libya is just absolute chaos. And the reason the French wanted it was because they wanted to take control of the oil. They wanted to enforce Western imperialism, and also they wanted to make sure that this Pan-African currency did not happen, because it's not in the West's best interest for Africa to flourish and to be economically dependent. And that's what Colonel Gaddafi was doing. Libya was one of the only countries in Africa where most people could read and write and went to school. It actually had a very high literacy rate, and it was a very developed country and a beautiful country. And I know many people who've been to Libya and said it was fabulous. Now, what's happened to Libya now? Well, it's gone into absolute chaos, and no one's doing anything about it. President Obama said that the countries that decided to do this disgusting invasion had been lacking support for the country. Of course they have, because you know, if the country's in crisis, they can do exactly what they want. They can take the oil, they can take the lithium, they can rob. Because you have to understand, guys, us Western countries, there's no natural resources in our countries. So the guise of war and the guise of making people free and democracy is all really a disguise and a complete lie. It's not about democracy, and it's not about helping human lives. It's about getting richer, and it's about securing oil and securing lithium and securing an abundance of things that don't grow in their native homes. It's actually a form of colonization many years later, and NATO have a lot to be accountable for. So the MP from Romford wants Mr. Cameron to stand up and be summoned before. Now, this really does remind me of the Chilcot Inquiry, and it really does remind me of the Iraq War. We could talk about this for days, and we could talk about this for years, quite frankly, about how it was wrong. But it seems like Libya has conveniently been tucked under the carpet, and that's why I'm glad that this topic has been spoken about. But what I find incredibly funny is that while David Cameron was in power, nobody criticised the Libyan war. Everyone was like, oh yes, that was it. There was an Arab Spring. They wanted democracy, and now hundreds of thousands of people are dead. It's like nobody touched it, and the mainstream media, who have no balls whatsoever, did not touch this story. They did not touch it. And now all of a sudden he's not an MP. They're talking about it. They're free to talk about it. It's like they can't properly criticise the current Prime Minister. That's how much control there was. And it was all neatly tucked away, like this was a neat thing to do. The fact is, we've conveniently forgot about Libya because of the lack of reporting. I don't even think there's one media outlet in the country because it's so dangerous. So we don't know what's really going on. Like, we have to remember, since David Cameron came into power, he has been on an assault of Syria and of Libya, and everybody talks about Tony Blair in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, we have the same thing. We have David Cameron with Libya and Syria. He has systematically ruined North Africa and parts of the Middle East. So going on about Tony Blair and the Iraq war, he's just the same as David Cameron, because no matter what party, they have the same agenda. The agenda which is work for the corporations, take your orders from the man behind the curtain, and hang us all out to dry. So guys, that was my video today, and let me know what you think about this disgraceful Libyan invasion and the fact there has been absolutely no media coverage on what's going on in what was once a beautiful country. So let me know, and once again, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe.